Leah Rader. I work as a UX research lead at Lyft, the rideshare company.
And hi, I'm Beth. I lead the research team at Asana, and we are an online work tracking tool.
So we're so happy to be here. We originally presented this presentation in June 2016 at the UXPA conference in Seattle, and then it was 15 principles. We winnowed it down to 10 for the purposes of this webinar today. If you want to see the original, UXPA keeps a really great archive of videos, so you'll be able to find it on their site. You can see what we decided to omit and also see how it's evolved, because we have revisited this and found that our thinking has changed over the past 18 months as we and how we want to talk about these topics. So the image that you're seeing right now is Beth's couch, and we spend a lot of time on this couch, thinking, philosophizing, advising each other, coaching each other, and literally working on projects together. And so it's symbolically important for what it means that we're even doing this presentation, that we have these principles that we live and work by. And we want to share some of these ideas with you all. We all have life hacks that we bring to our work, and these are 10 of our life hacks. Okay. And I want to give a little background about why bother to listen to this, like why should we be giving this talk. So we have been around the block, to say the least. We have matured in our careers at the same time that UX and design research is maturing as a practice. We have learned a lot. We've been working in tiny agencies, giant agencies, really big Fortune 500 companies, tiny startups, and in lots of industries, lots of problem types. So we're really lucky to have all that exposure, and now we want to, share a few ideas that you can use after this presentation.
Cool. So what we'll cover today is I'm just going to give you an outline for what you can expect for each of these 10 insights. So we'll give you the insight, or thing that we believe, give a little description about what it is and how we think about it, and then something we're pretty excited about is giving you really specific ways that you can try it out. So practical resources, the way we're doing it, but then also links and stuff so that you can go out and give it a try yourself.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive in. Topic 1, it's know thyself. And we're using the concept of Johari's window as a lens for pretty much everything that's in this presentation. Johari's window is made of 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is open self. That means things that you know about yourself as well as things that other people also know. And then quadrant 2 is called blind spot. So these are things that other people know about you, but you don't know about yourself. And the third quadrant is hidden self. This is things that you know about yourself but you do not share with others. And the last quadrant is the unknown self. These are things that you don't know about yourself and no one else does either. And this model is a sort of a self-reflection tool. You can use it as a way to consider, how do you present yourself to groups, how do you know yourself, and what are opportunities for you to grow and change. And so I want to break it down just a little bit more. People with a really big open self, they are easy to talk to, they communicate honestly, openly, they get along well in a team. People with a small open self, or like a large hidden self, they seem closed off, and they often they have trouble working well with others. Maybe they're not as trusted. And the thing about the hidden self is, I want to be clear that this is not just that you should disclose everything about yourself. Of course, things should be private. But the idea is that there's also unhelpful things in the hidden self, like sensitivities or fears, hidden agendas, or manipulative intentions, and those can impact our work. And so we want to shrink the hidden self over time.
Also, it takes a lot to keep that stuff hidden, so there's a lot of mental cognitive overload to keep those things hidden that you want to try and keep hidden.
Mm-hmm. People with a big blind spot are just a pain in the ass to work with. It's really a burden to other people if they know something about you and they have to do a lot of work to maintain this secret, protecting you from, knowledge about yourself, or they have to find a way to tell you, thus, they could get backlash, they could, the relationship could suffer, and so those aren't good things. And then the last thing is, like, if you have a really big unknown self, there can be positives and negatives to this, because this includes capabilities, aptitudes that you underestimate about yourself or that are untried, and so you could be missing out on leveraging those capabilities. But it can also include other more negative things like fears and aversions or biases that you're bringing into your work. And as researchers, this really matters, because we know that we all bring bias to our work, and if you can understand and uncover what you're dealing with, then you'll be more equipped to do better research with less bias. All right, so if you're trying to increase your open self and shrink these other quadrants, there are 3 strategies you use. You reduce your blind spot by soliciting feedback, and you shrink your unknown self by engaging in self-reflection, journaling, meditating, thinking about how you are engaging with yourself and others. And lastly, you share your hidden self by engaging in the art of self-disclosure. And so there are some resources that are in the notes for this that you can go to for how to tackle this as a project, so that you don't get yourself into an awkward situation where you've over-disclosed. And take a slow. All right, shall we go into the second principle?
Let's do it. Okay, so hot on the heels of knowing thyself, the other side of that is that it's okay not to know everything yet. So that can feel counterintuitive, because by nature of the job as a researcher, you do know a lot about the customer or your industry or your product. And so you do hold a lot of information. In some organizations, there's even pressure on the researcher or the research team to be the sole owner. Like, I don't have to know everything because the researcher knows. We'll just ask the researcher. Mm-hmm. And so that's problematic, though, for a few reasons. One, it contributes to this imposter syndrome that we've probably all heard of and possibly experienced.
I've experienced it.
We do. That's a lot. We talk about that kind of a lot. So people come to you with questions you feel like you should have the answer to, so you feel bad or worried or insufficient that you don't have those answers. And so you end up having to maybe scramble to find it, compromising the work, or you operate blind without all the necessary information. And all of that, like I said, sort of compromises the quality of your work, because you just feel like, I need to get an answer to people. But that just contributes and perpetuates this idea that research is the knower and holder of all this information. Mm-hmm. So I remember this when I first started in research when I was at Marriott with Leah. At my first stakeholder meeting, I was terrified going in there because I didn't know anything.
Oh, the kickoff meeting? The
kickoff meeting. I was like, they're gonna ask me who we should talk to and like what questions we're gonna ask and what the project's like, and I don't know any of that information. And Leah was like, yes, exactly. You don't know any of that information. That's what this meeting is for. You're here to facilitate that conversation so that you can get that information. And sort of, to me, the little trick out of these kickoff meetings became like, they're going to write and do everything for you, essentially. That if you're facilitating, you're going to find out what the business goal is. You're going to understand what the questions are. That's all basically going to tell you. They're not going to tell you, but that information is going to tell you what the approach should be, who we should talk to, how long it might take to get the information that you're looking for. So that was a really big light bulb for me, and something that I try and share a lot with other researchers as well, is that you don't have to know everything going into projects. In fact, we see research as facilitators. So you facilitate the collective knowledge and the group problem solving in order to move things forward. This also helps everyone own the outcome and own all of the information. which to me is now sort of, that dynamic has sort of flipped. It used to be that I felt very worried and insufficient that I didn't have all the answers, and now that sort of is flipped, that I feel more the pang coming when I hear someone outside of the research team, someone in the company who says that they don't know something about the customer or the product that I feel like the research team knows. So we're trying to do more to get that knowledge out of the team and
like
into the rest.
Socializing it, outreach.
Yeah, which is always a challenge for people. So here's how maybe you can try this. To focus on the facilitation, not just the answers. So a facilitator is not an answer provider, but rather a tour guide. So we think when Leah and I go into meetings, we try and have this mantra of, I don't have to know, I just have to move things forward, which can relieve a lot of pressure. Just be knowledgeable enough about the topic in order to be able to provide guide rails and guiding questions. And so, next one. A way that you can do that is read The Art of Facilitation by Dale Hunter. It's got some really practical things in there about how to account for the nonlinear and sometimes meandering conversations that can happen, how to reground people and tactfully change the status quo. Game storming, I'm sure a ton of you are familiar with this, but it's still a perennial favorite of ours. If you want to get a quick reference on activities, we particularly like it because it can be organized based on the outcome that you're looking for. So if you're looking to generate ideas versus narrow or gain consensus, they're really easy to follow. And then this one I just read recently and I liked a lot it was from a newsletter on D-Scouts People Nerds on 10 tips for reading the room. Has really great, a quick read, and has some really nice tips like the 4-player model theory that divides roles and people into the team setting in move, follow, oppose, and bystand, which is a really useful way to move the conversation forward.
Okay, here is our third principle. It's called Play with Techniques, and this was a long time lesson. I've learned this over many years. Earlier in my career, I was really concerned about doing things the right way and the wrong way, and as I learned more about theory and I had more applied experience, I began to see research more as a flexible tool, a flexible set of tools that you can apply creatively to problem solving. And they're adaptable, and they let you get the right data for the situation you're in instead of having to rigidly follow a prescriptive way of conducting a methodology or technique. And this manifests in 2 different ways, actually. So one is that the time you have with a research participant or participants is flexible. So it's okay, for example, to do generative research at the same time as usability research if you need to fill gaps in knowledge. And the other way it manifests is that the techniques themselves are flexible. So we can push the boundaries of how we do them. We can try new things that we don't even not sure how to do yet, but we can start playing with them in order to see how we might be able to press them into service for us as we are trying to answer complex questions.
And we'll probably touch on this a little bit towards the end, but one thing that we've certainly found is that the participants are more flexible than sometimes we give them credit for.
Yeah.
So I've found that it's okay to context switch. I mean, not hugely, but they are definitely willing to go along with us when we're mixing it up, so to speak.
Right. So I just want to share a quick example of this recently. So this photo shows a progression that I've been playing around with over the last year. So I have been looking for ways to blur the line between my discussion guide and what the participant experiences in their session. And I really wanted more transparency. I wanted to give the participant more control over how the interview unfolded and what the questions were going to be. And so I made my discussion guide on cards, and I laid them out, and I didn't have a separate guide. These were all my questions. And so I asked the participant to choose one of the cards to start with, and then they would determine the order of topics as the interview unfolded. And it worked really well. I tried this just with 4 people, and it made such a relaxed, really comfortable conversational style interview. I'll totally try it again.
So you felt like the participants were willing to go along with you on
Oh
this?
yeah, it's a totally easy setup. You just, you know, here are the things I'm interested in. Which of these resonate with you? Where should we start our conversation? And I even included like these little Dixit cards. These are the photos, or like they're little kind of cartoon images, and they let a participant select an image and then talk about like why that was meaningful to them, and it helps you get at sort of associations that they have to a topic. So it's fun, really easy and fun to do. Okay, good.
Cool.
Let's move on. So here are things we'd love for you to try. So you should experiment with bending the rules and see what happens. One thing is you could design a participatory activity for every study you do. Incorporate some moment where your participant draws something like a map or a relationship or an idea. And so you're getting them out of just like feeding you information, but also creating something. And like you can leverage their insights and their creativity as well, as an example. And then when you do try out one of these new things, just test drive it with one person in one study. And that will give you a lot of food for thought, and you can think about how you might improve it, try it again, expand upon it. And there could be a criticism of this, like, oh, well, if you only do it with one person, then you won't have comparable data that you can look at across your sample. And that's true. But that's okay, because the point of this was not to get information that you can then say, there are multiple people that have responded, and I see a pattern here. It was more about exploring and understanding the possibilities for a technique, and then you can apply that later to a bigger sample if you choose to.
This just dawns on me. I feel like this is probably very easy in-house. This is something that we do, but you just recently came from an agency.
Oh yeah, I did that at the agency.
Yeah, you had the same flexibility. You felt like you were able to.
Yeah, I think you can always sneak something in, and just, you know, don't ask permission, get forgiveness. Just a little experiment.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the last thing is to create a monthly ritual to intentionally play with unfamiliar techniques. And I want to credit Beth with this. This is something they do at Asana, and I think this is great. I want you just to describe what you do so other people can try this too.
So it's a monthly thing we do. We call it Research-O-Rama. So basically it's a rotating, regular rotating research, that's alliteration, time for the researchers here to try something new. So it's the first Thursday, I believe, of every month. And we just dedicate the day, and the researcher picks a technique that they haven't tried before, they think that would be interesting, or that they think would be an interesting match for a question that we have, and then they give it a try. It's a really low pressure way, because there's not a project team who is waiting to make a business decision on it. It's something that we've totally chosen on our own. And so we still get really interesting information, the researcher learns, but it's very low risk. And so that's really, I think, been exciting for our team to feel like they've got sort of quote-unquote permission to try something new.
Yeah, it's like a little experimentation lab. I like that. I really like that. Okay, next one.
Okay, this is my mom. Dottie. So she has a kind of a mantra of while you're at it philosophy, especially when it comes to keeping the house tidy. So while you're at it, if you're going upstairs, take these shoes. If you're going downstairs, take this basket. If you're putting the dishes away, the cabinet's probably empty, you might as well wipe it out while you're there. Basically do a little bit more and it all adds up. And so we, Leah and I, have adopted this same philosophy as an opportunity to do a little bit more while you're at it. Basically think about the big picture and the long view, no matter what size of project you're working on. You don't have to be on the big strategic project, whatever that strategic word means to you, in order to do strategic work on every project. So even the most seemingly tactical work, like if you're looking at usability of a feature or a functionality, we think there's space to cumulatively add and learn to that project, sort of what Leah was just saying about being flexible in your techniques and the time that you spend with a participant. Can you find an opportunity to add a bit more to get to a larger question? We think research is pretty perfectly poised within a company to influence company direction and strategy and business decisions. So we look for those opportunities to dig deeper in every project.
Mm-hmm. And I also think this is helpful to stay inspired, keep your spirits up, as I've noticed in my own career, like sometimes you are in charge of those magical, exciting, strategic projects, and sometimes you're doing more tactical, okay, forgive me if this is the wrong way to say it, but like grunt work, like you're like helping get the daily tasks done, but they may not be the most exciting research projects you've ever tackled. But when you bring this mindset, you can find opportunities to keep yourself really engaged and really interested in the work.
Yeah. So here's ways that you might be able to try it. Make your research more nutritionally dense. Use your screeners strategically. That's something that we've done a really long time. This story sticks with me for so long. So we both worked at a company called Revolution Health, and we were doing a lot of research at the time.
Yeah, we were doing a different project every week.
Yeah. No exaggeration, it was pretty crazy. Because we were having people come in person, and if it happened that the person was early and we were running late, right, there could be anything from like 10 to 30 minutes of time where this person was just sort of waiting for us. And so we had so many questions because the product hadn't launched yet, that we were just trying to maximize whatever we could time we had with our participants. So as part of the screener and as part of their wait time, we would have them fill out surveys and more forms as they waited. And we had the recruiters that we were asking, having help us also add some extra 2 or 3 questions. And we do that now at Asana too. Talk to the business overall and see what kind of questions we haven't been able to get to, and is there an opportunity for us to use our screeners to get at that. Basically, you're just, even if you don't talk to them in a session or use them for whatever activity you're looking for, you still have those extra few questions that they answered in your screener.
Exactly.
Tackle the backlog of knowledge gaps. I sort of just mentioned this, but there's always experience questions or perception questions, mental models, journey, that or even just usability questions that you might have about your product that you haven't fit into your project, got left off of the last one. Mm-hmm. At Asana, we keep a project of ongoing that we can just sort of, anybody can ask a question that's outside of a project, so we can go back there and mine that and see if the project that we're working on is a good fit for squeezing in a couple things. Mm-hmm. Help out another team with tag-on research. Basically, there are probably other project teams who could use the help. Maybe they don't have a project coming up yet, but you do. Is there an opportunity for you to dedicate 5 or 10 minutes to answer some of their research questions and pay it forward?
Yeah, that's what we do at Lyft, and it really helps. Like, you just find out a couple things somebody else needs. They've got a couple questions they want to decide, but they don't have research on the table coming up, so you just pop it in to your study.
Nice. Ooh, cross-pollinate. So this is another sort of core value of Leah and I that we have adopted at Asana. So we have a set of core values, and one of them is generous collaboration. Basically, input from unexpected and adjacent perspectives will challenge thinking and strengthen work. So in the same way that bees transfer pollen from one flower to another as sort of an accidental consequence of their food collecting, it's actually really critical to a flourishing food supply. So similarly, we want a flourishing supply of brain food. I think I might kill this metaphor. To do this, we need to be deliberate about our pollination and how we do this. In order to do that, we want you to consciously widen the number of topics that you absorb. So as you do that, you'll be able to make connections and enrich your work more. You'll be able to reference metaphors and analogies from other domains and apply them to your analysis and storytelling. And that means you're going to be able to connect to people more. You'll basically be able to relate to them more when you can tell stories that they connect with. You'll see eyes light up and say, oh, I get what you're saying, because you're able to relate to them and not just say words and information to them. When you consciously widen the range of people you connect with, you'll also expand your POV. So there have been a lot of studies recently about how valuable it is to have a diverse team and diverse perspectives on your team. And we think that that's really important. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that, incorporating those people in your work in a second. Okay, so here's a way that you can try it. We suggest start by reading Creativity by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's sort of a rallying cry. It definitely was for us about how the responsibility lies with you in developing this quote-unquote creativity as a skill. It's not innate. You can feel that way, that like, oh, you're just the creative type. But really, this book is inspiring research about how creativity isn't whimsical, but rather how people, some famous people who are perceived as being creative actively seek out input from other domains in order to get their own creativity going. So I think it's a good way to start. Yeah, this is the one I really go all out on the metaphor here. Cross-pollinate across domains that you're less familiar with, or branch out your media. So this is both topic and channel. So if you normally read quote-unquote industry-related content, what I want to say is not just cross-pollinate, but also give yourself permission to realize that the things that you feel like maybe aren't work-related really could have an influence in how you're thinking.
Absolutely.
All right.
And you're like one of the best people at this. You do it the most of anyone I know, where you're constantly seeking new, strange, and unusual forms of input. It's really good.
That sounds so mysterious. But I do have, thank you, so the way I do it is I set aside a few 30-minute blocks across the week, and I call it replenishing the well. At work, I'll have maybe lunch and I'll watch a TED Talk that's interesting to me, but they always have these recommended next. So I'll just keep clicking through on that 30 minutes of 10-minute talks or 6-minute talks, and basically I'm getting further and further away from my original topic, but it becomes really interesting. I end up, looking at, biologically referenced art, like how do fish impact, oil painting in, Sweden.
And then that comes back around to influence how you think about how do people do work together in the modern world, which influences your product development and your research.
There'd be every chance that you'd see like a model about Swedish fish, like after that episode. If you're all about blogs and you just only read blogs, try a podcast instead, or an exploratory Twitter feed. That's something that Leah just did recently that I was super stoked about, because I've sort of let Twitter go by the wayside for me, and I'm inspired to give that a try.
Yeah, so I use Twitter in a specific way right now, because I noticed that my feed was not very diverse, and I kind of consciously, for the past maybe 8 to 12 months, have been seeking out more and more political activists, like people of color who are journalists, activists, or just have really strong points of view about how they're experiencing unfolding news events, and has been hugely educational for me, because I'm not a person of color, and it really benefits me to more deeply consider how they're interpreting news events.
And then also recently, Creative Mornings has a really great list of newsletters that they love. They're not all related to design. There's one called Why Aren't We Dancing, which sends an urban dance video to your email once a week.
Oh my gosh, cool.
I know. Or a podcast broadcast, which is a curated set of podcasts. So basically it just gives you an opportunity to try out something new. and yeah, don't feel. I want you to feel excited about the things that you are in your personal life. That you need to make time for that because it really will influence your work. So the last one is the last metaphor I'm gonna do for pollination map is for your projects. So basically, it's a framework to help you think through not just who's necessary on a project, but also who's interested and interesting in the work that you're doing to help get them involved and at the right level. So it looks like this. You've got, of course, your core project team. You list out who those people are. And of course, you need to, this also helps, the way we use it is to give you consciousness about who, but then also how much effort you should put into it. Because for a really long time, I had this pressure where I felt like I really did. I needed to have every person in the corner of the company hear the research. Everybody needed to care about the research and the people and the customer that we were serving. Turns out I don't think that's actually true. The people in HR don't need to have the same level of excitement and interest as the project team. And it made for a kind of a difficult time because I would just try really hard. I have all kinds of bribes and ploys of like, how can I make this interesting? What if I did a tap dance? What if I did a video? And just trying to get more and more people in. And so that really started to wear on me. It made me feel like that I wasn't being successful, and there's always stories about how do you get people involved? How do you get people involved? So this really put the right expectation, I feel like, on us. So core team, you have to work harder. They should be more involved, but not to the point of every single, all the time minute of all the research, because that's your job. You're the researcher. That's what we do. They're doing other things. So, so the core project team, and then the next layer out are stakeholders and related teams. And then there's the interested and interesting people, people that you think could lend a different perspective to your work, who also may become allies for you through the company if you've got a message that needs to sort of like cross the chasm into, say, like we're product into the business side of teams. And if you have something controversial, you might consider those people who could help, support you as they understand the topic and can lend credibility to it. It also fortifies your work. You can find out early on who might question or who you're going to be able to get support for. So one thing I'll say is that sometimes this might put, depending on how big this hive goes, it could be you're really going to have to use your facilitation skills, because it could be bigger than your core team who may be a little less familiar with the project. So, so yeah, lean on those facilitation skills to make sure that you can manage the room.
Nice. Okay, number 6, mind your mind. So for a long time, there has been the advice to sleep on it for problem solving, and sleeping on it is something that we take very seriously. And I was really excited to find a study that kind of confirms this belief that problem solving is strongly enhanced by sleeping on the thing you're trying to solve. So I just want to quickly convince you that this is true and kind of advise on how you might adjust your work process to take advantage of this. So the Lancaster University in UK did a study to determine whether sleep helps with problem solving. They had a bunch of word problems. I'm going to show you one example. So basically there's these 3 words, and you have to figure out what is a 4th word that unifies or kind of goes with all 3 of these words. So write, cat, and carbon. And the answer for this one is copy. So copyright, copycat, carbon copy. And so they had all these word problems. Some were considered to be easy, some were considered to be hard. And then the research participants were divided into 4 groups about how they went through problem solving. So some of them saw the problems at night and then solved the problems in the morning after sleeping. Another group would see the problems in the morning and then solve them later that night, so same day. And then some would see the problems in the morning and then solve them immediately that same morning. And the last group would see the problems at night and then solve them that same night. And the findings were really clear that if you have an easy problem, the best strategy is to see it in the morning and then wait a period of time throughout the day, solve it later in the day. And for hard problems, you want to see a problem right before bed, sleep on it, and then solve it, make progress on it in the morning. And so we use this strategy a lot, like especially when we're in the analysis phase of projects. We will employ these strategies. So the way you can try it yourself is to take easy problems or things you suspect might be easy. Look at them in the morning when you get to the office or start your workday. Put them away, and then in the afternoon, just knock them out after your subconscious has worked on them for a short period of time. If you know you have a tougher problem, make sure you're looking at it at the end of the day, put it away, sleep on it, and then have a big work session first thing in the morning. Don't have other meetings or tackle dumb stuff in the morning. You need to work on your big, tough problems. And usually for us, that's like produce massive, very fast progress. Like we can write really complex things in a couple of days by using this strategy.
Yeah, there's a little joke that we have of like once we get to a really hard place in a synthesis or analysis session, we'll just like take a break and Leah will be like, okay, let's go, let's leave and we'll have a dream about it and we'll come back and it's true.
And we'll have the answer in the morning.
We'll have the answers. Yeah.
All right, next one.
Sherpa synthesis. So a Sherpa is sort of an experienced guide that helps people get on mountain climbing expeditions. So in this analogy, you, the researcher, are this experienced guide. We really feel like that we have to guide or facilitate the team through the data and synthesis toward the ultimate insights. So remember that facilitation slide earlier and also the idea that everyone should own the information. We think this is a really strong way to make that happen. Because right after a session, the information is fresh and you're inspired, the wheels are still turning, and people are excited to talk about what they just learned. The ideas and insights are stronger when everyone does it together. And also, if you wait until the end, you're likely building more on recency bias. Mm-hmm. You have to reconstruct things. Really major bits will fall through the cracks. And we don't think that this adds to the overall time. In fact, in a recent listserv conversation, someone said that they felt like it, quotes, adds to the shelf life of their work, which I totally believe. So the first part is the conducting the in-the-moment debriefs to help bring people along. So basically you want to get a shared understanding as you go through the research. You can kind of find out what people are wondering about as you go. Mm-hmm. Ensures that the team is on the same page, enables you to hear what's important as you go. So basically you're doing sort of meta research on them. So
this is the most important thing about these things.
Yeah, I agree. The debrief for me is a way, for us, is a way to see when you have the stakeholder group, you have people in there, what questions are they asking you? Because you know that that's important to them and you better account for that. You better deal with that. So either that means finding out more information about that, addressing it in the final deliverable or presentation, but basically they're clues to help you along.
Yeah.
It also helps you maintain momentum. There's less group memory loss when you do it after each time, and it speeds up your work. There's going to be less blank page syndrome at the end when you have to do a documentation. So that said, you have to still be prepared for these events, these debriefs, these mini debriefs. So don't disappear and do it all yourself in a black box, like, okay, thanks, I have the information, I'll go away. But also, don't force everybody to go through every single bit of detail either. So you set up the system, you sort of pack so that everyone will have a good experience. You're the one who's prepared and can guide them through these conversations and process. Structure will make the facilitation a lot easier, and it feels kind of magical how quickly you can get insights when it's structured like this. One thing that we've seen is that it feels very exciting after a session to stop to talk about what you just learned and sort of let the conversation unfold. But at the end, if you don't have any way to frame that conversation or to document it, it just sort of gets lost, and you might as well have not had it.
Yeah, it just disappears into the
It disappears. Okay, a way to do it is a mini debrief after each session. So that's what we were just talking about, but we have a really structured way that we do it. After every single debrief, we ask these 3 things. What surprised us? Is there anything unexpected that we want to know? So basically get them out. Stickies is our preferred method, but you can use whatever works for you. Basically, it's going to be the framework for how you think about your analysis. If there's any patterns or anything that you saw that was familiar, sometimes people have a tendency to skip this because they think it's what they've already know. But in the light of the new data, you might get a different perspective. So we really encourage you to still make some space for any patterns or things that are familiar. And then process improvements. Also really important. It's another place where we see people get that feeling of they need to know everything to be perfect. But we want to encourage you not to be afraid to adjust if you need to. If you're finding this is a time when we say, hey, did anybody wish that we spent more time on a particular topic, or less time, or how do we feel about how I approached this kind of conversation? So that it's a real in-the-moment way to give quick, short feedback that feels low pressure, but can make a huge difference in the next session that you go. It's also a way, going back to your stakeholders, when you hear them say, I wish I learned more about this or that, it's so great to find out now that at the end, after you've spoken to everybody, all the sessions are over, and now you realize that a stakeholder wished that you had spent more time or less time someplace. And for sure, don't let people go away without it. Another reason to have these is accountability. When everybody's in the room, you can count for that person who has only seen one session but will make these generalized statements like people or everyone I saw, which was just one person. You can sort of kindly hold people accountable and coach them into the other things that people have seen so that you can actually make a pattern out of it.
All right, let's go on to our next one. Okay, number 8, make models and make friends. So by this I mean using visual models beyond description and verbatims and video of participants, using visual models to convey larger unifying ideas. And researchers who use visual models to communicate, I find, are doing higher quality work. And the reason is models, they tell stories, they help show that most likely story that explains the evidence, they help us make sense of things, they help us understand what's important, they help us communicate with one another and learn and teach each other and discuss what is the meaning of these findings. And it actually can sound so lofty that it can feel impossible to make and use these things, but they do not have to be fancy. Did you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that what, you know, when you were saying about higher quality work, I also think a related concept is that it's sort of creates an everlastingness about the work too, because people can reference that model, they start to use that language of that model, it becomes shorthand, which is really
yeah, it's true. Like you can remember the visual of a model, the story of a model, more than you can remember like just words about a finding. So they can be stickier in our minds. But they don't have to be fancy or complex. They just need to tell a story that people can easily read. And so, for example, this is just a dumb sketch I made in a hotel room
that I forced her to keep in this deck because I still thought it was so good.
It explains like the value of a model. So it's a little map that shows how much people understand and buy into what you're saying about your research from low to high, and then how well you're making and using visual models in your storytelling. It's from weak to strong. And so there's like this nice relationship, like the more you use them and the stronger they are, the more people can understand and buy in. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that's great about models and makes them easy to get into and use is that they are a lot of basic shapes that we can reuse over and over. So if you've never tried doing visual modeling, here's your starter kit. You have a way to show relationships. That's the 2x2 and like the Venn diagram. And you have a way to show process, like the little process doodle at the bottom or this circular map. We use these a lot, like journey maps, for example. Those are process models. And they help you show priorities. They help you show organization. And as Beth was saying, they're so memorable because they're visual, and so they stick in our minds longer than just words. Yeah, they're like I said, they become shorthand. We have one we just did recently here at Asana. There's a really great write-up of all the findings, but I hear this trigger to track term all the time, and it was a pretty quick model that one of the researchers put together, and that's the thing that is sort of in the ether in the conversation. It's become a shorthand for getting people to trigger them to capture something in Asana. What kind of model was it? Was it a 2x2? Was it a Venn? It was a process model? Yeah, it was a process, yeah. So it was like trigger, track, lands in Asana. Nice, yeah. Okay, so if you have not started visual modeling, here are some resources and ideas to try. I really want to encourage you to read articles by Hugh Dubberly. He is a model making machine, and he has put a lot of thinking across his career into the role of models, the value of models, how to make models. And so go to dubberly.com and read everything. The next thing is to start sketching yourself. So you can make models, little sketches about your findings whenever you are starting to talk about things like a process, or if you hear yourself saying, oh, there's a relationship between this one thing and this other thing, you can draw that relationship. Or yeah. Comparisons, if you know you have some priorities, perhaps you can model that. If you're using analogies, that can potentially be a prompt to start sketching and drawing those relationships, or what is that analogy telling about? Yeah, if you're here like, oh yeah, it's just like a tree, and you can start to draw a model around what that might look like. Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. And one thing I like that Beth was telling me, this anecdote like 2 days ago actually, was it can be really helpful to start small. So what she does is do sketches on paper that are more private, and then once you're feeling more comfortable with the sketch, or like you're feeling like it has some legs worth exploring, you can put it up onto the whiteboard on the wall where it's more public, and then other people can help contribute or develop that model. Yeah, with you. Yeah. So if you've got someone who feels unsure, insecure, like basically partner up, because people can feel a little intimidated by hopping up and just starting to sketch, or what, like the whole concept of models can feel scary to people. So if you just sort of start sketching, sort of people will, they're making models before they realize it. Cool. All right, so let's see. Yes. So we only have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go super fast to the last two, and then we'll see if there are some questions. Cool. Okay. So number 9 is called Channel Safire. This is about William Safire. He was a political columnist for the New York Times, and he also wrote a column called On Language. He is one of my role models for how to think about and improve my writing. And he wrote this funny article called 30 Rules for Writers, and they're all very satirical, and says, so here's one of my favorites. If you reread your work, you can find on rereading a great deal of repetition can be avoided by rereading and editing. So this is the idea of we should all be critical of our writing in the same way that we're critical during usability tests. We need to make sure our writing is useful, it's usable, it's desirable, it's simple, it's clear, just like Safire would want it to be. And the second one that I really love is that he wrote in this article called 30 Rules for Writers is the passive voice should never be used. And a quick rule of thumb that we've discovered that is really fun is if you can put the phrase by zombies after your verb, then you are writing in passive voice and you need to rewrite it. So for example, the app was found to be highly usable by zombies, means that now it's in passive voice and you need to go back and restructure your sentence. And so a few resources we want to point you to if you would like to improve your writing and how you think about your how you communicate with language, go to the Grammar Girl podcast, read How Not to Write by William Safire, read this quick little article, 30 Rules for Writers by William Safire, and 25 Things Writers Should Stop Doing by Chuck Wendick. I think it's really funny that it's like, hey, here's how not to write, and here's your things you should stop doing. Okay. Let's go to our last one. So this one is called Be Like Studs. This is based on Studs Terkel. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning oral historian. He was this master interviewer. He's famous for enabling people to tell their best stories, even when they're very sensitive, very private topics. And he had this interesting strategy that he stumbled upon. He would purposefully make a mistake right away in an interview to reduce the power distance between himself and the participant. He discovered this one time he was doing an interview with a young woman, and she seemed really nervous and maybe very low confidence, and then she suddenly said, hey, have you noticed that that machine is not working? The tape is not moving. So he had not turned on the tape recorder. He pressed the wrong button, and she reached over and turned it on, and it kind of like shifted the relationship between them. Like, she became more powerful because she saw like, oh, he makes dumb mistakes just like anyone else, even though he's like the person who's supposedly the expert in this situation. And after he reflected on that experience, he was like, wow, it can really help to be a net to help you develop your relationship with your participant. And so that's somewhat related to this idea that Liz Sanders, she's a professor of design at Ohio State University, and she made this model about the evolution of design research in 2008. And she kind of described it as like, hey, you can have an expert mindset where the researcher is the expert and they have to extract information from that passive, reactive subject. And then on the opposite side is a participatory mindset where the researchers, the researcher and the participant are partners. The participant has a right to influence the research. And I find that in my experience, a lot of researchers are over on the expert mindset side, but I find that being further over on the participatory mindset side gives you more room to find new ideas and explore possibilities that you couldn't from the expert mindset. I feel like Studs Terkel is like this early proponent of this like participatory mindset that Liz Sanders has really pushed forward. So if you want to think more about like how can you connect more with participants, a couple of ideas are show your fallibility. One thing I do is help ease my own anxiety when I'm starting research. I usually tell the first 1 or 2 or 3 participants like, hey, this is my first session, or I'm early in this project, so if I make mistakes, go easy on me. And then they're like, okay, haha, right, we're both just humans here doing something together. And then you can experiment with status, find ways to put your participant at ease. I have a resource that you can check out on that in a moment. And then, again, invite collaboration from participants.
Like the concept that you did where you allow them to choose the guide, choose their own experience.
I feel like all these points are really just one big point. Okay, sorry. So some resources you can go to. Studsterkel.org has recordings of his interviews. You can hear a master interviewer. And there's this book called Impro by Keith Johnstone. It's a book about how to do theatrical improvisation, but his chapter 3 on status is a profound, amazing, mind-blowing chapter on how do we lower our status, raise our status, lower other people's status, or raise other people's status. And then, of course, improvisers exaggerate that in on stage, but it's happening in real life all the time too. And then again, Liz Sanders, read Convivial Toolbox, understand like how her philosophy and approach to doing participatory collaborative research. Yeah. Okay. So that is the end of our 10 principles, and going forward, we hope to find 10 more by having more couch time and continuing our collaboration together. So let's see if there are any questions or comments that anyone would like us to respond to. If not, then you'll get 4 minutes back in your life. Let's see. Okay. Ooh, we're seeing. Okay. Could you elaborate game storming a bit more? We may not have time right now. Hold on. Please check out that book, though. It's an excellent book.
So yeah, actually gamestorming is pretty easy. It's the name of the resource, but it's divided into chapters, like we said. So if you say, I'm looking to generate ideas for a new product, it will give you a step-by-step guide of, here's an activity that you could do. You know, it's good for this number of people, between like 6 and 10 people, and you'll need these resources, and it gives you everything that you could possibly need and how long it will take. It's a really very highly structured informational guide that doesn't have to be read from beginning to end. You can just like open it up, pick an activity that you think is really would work for you. Do you reveal to external clients if you're doing a little more? Leah, what would you say?
Okay. Or do you, okay, so the question is, do you reveal to external clients if you're doing, quote, a little bit more on one of their projects, or do you not do this when working with external clients? I have done both. So what I would recommend is, you're going to have to read your client, of course. If you have a client who you feel like you've gained their trust and you have a good working relationship, then you can say, I have an idea, I want to try it with one person, it'll take 10 minutes, and here's its purpose. Because it's better to be upfront since they're paying the bills. And if you don't yet have that relationship with them, then I would try very hard to develop that before you start doing unusual, unexpected things with their time and money. But if you work in-house, then you might have more latitude to do that, because you have this ongoing relationship with your product team, and presumably you can have, you know, gained their trust and be ongoingly showing them the value of experimentation. Hope that helps. All right. This person says, I missed the name of the first principle. Would you mind just restating it? It's called Know Thyself. It's the one about Johari's window. This person says, what are your favorite UXR tools? I'm not sure. Does that mean, let's see, what does that mean? I use the word tool really flexibly, so you might have to update your question to make sure I understand. Sorry, I don't feel like I can answer that yet. What role do you see for tools such as those from, quote, Optimal Workshop that can be used for grouping items and coming up with a mental construct for things they may not be familiar to people? Oh yeah, we've used Optimal Workshop tons. So those are tools that you can use to support a larger conversation of, how do people understand our products? How do people navigate our products and offerings and services? And they don't have to be treated as a methodology you'd use alone. You can group them with other explorations. Like one time I did a card sort using Optimal Workshop. Actually, sorry. Yeah, it was a card sort. And I had people do it as though it was an unmoderated test, but I watched them do it live, and then I had them go back through and do a debrief interview with me and tell me why they did what they did. Yeah. So even though it was supposed to be quote unquote unmoderated, I still set it up so that I could be with them remotely.
Let's see. There was one here. What about this one? As a young researcher, how do you get people to take you more seriously when you lead a session? Does it just come with time?
I would say the more organized you are, the more you come off as that you'll get respect.
So much.
So there's this old adage that you can use in this context, young researcher. It's called, it's a storytelling technique. It's called, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then third, tell them what you told them. So you need to frame things and set people's expectations. You say, here's how we're going to run the session. I've got 3 goals, A, B, and C. And we're going to do this activity for that goal. We're going to do this other activity. It's going to work like this. So you frame everything, and then they know what to listen for. They know how to be listening and what to look for. Then you do the activity, and you say, okay, so here's what we just did. We did this, we did A, we did B, and you see that we got the information that we needed. So that was a really fast breakdown of that, but when you frame people's expectations, they trust you more.
Yeah, I think that's really huge. That it's been really, really important in our lives, especially from research where it can feel like one of those areas, those disciplines that's not entirely clear or as quote-unquote established as, say, design or marketing. The more that you can set up a structure and a framework so that people can see how organized and how much you understand. It's really helpful. The more organized and you can explain to other people, the more that they will trust you.
So we have a lot more questions here, and it's 1 minute after the hour. What should we do? Janet, please weigh in.
Hey Beth and Leah, thanks so much for this webinar, and so exciting. Yeah, I see that there are more questions. Maybe is there any way you know, the attendees can follow up with you if they have any other questions? We don't have a lot of time right now, but you know, maybe at a later point.
So I want a copy of all these questions so we can write a response.
Yeah, we could look at these questions and we would love to either write a response or maybe we could record a response.
Yes, because these questions are so good and so exciting. I really want to deal with them. So, and I really appreciate everyone writing these questions. I feel so excited. I want to learn right now what's going on here.
So yes, so I guess your question here is, yes, how about we follow up with you, and then I suppose maybe you can, since you have contact with everyone, you can put a message out with the questions and then a way for them to get in touch with us.
Perfect. That works great for me. And so, yeah, I'll copy all the questions and we'll follow up. And just to answer a couple of questions from attendees about sharing the recordings. Yes, we are going to share the recordings in a couple of days. So you will get it through email, to your email, the email that you registered for in GoToWebinar. And yeah, so thanks so much. I will be following up, and I appreciate it. As I said, if you have any suggestions for future speakers or topics, please let us know. We are planning exciting things for next year. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks, everybody.